So this will be on your assessment, right? On Friday the 13th. I wish it could be Friday the 13th and Halloween at the same time, but I can't figure that out. It could happen. It could happen, guys. There's a chance. All right. We just changed Halloween. Okay, so here's what we're going to do, right? I'm going to go through this. I want y'all to kind of watch through the process to see what we're going to do it, and we're going to do it step by step. That single step at a time problem solving is what you need to do. If you try to go, okay, I need a for loop that does all of this stuff at one time, it's going to be really hard for you to follow it through all the way. You've got to break it down into steps, so you're always solving simple problems that make up a complex problem, right? So, first thing we're going to do, let's build a loop that counts through each number in this list, right? Go with me? So what's that going to look like? Grace, can you help me out?
Whether or not I would use minimum, or if I would create a new.
Okay, so let's create it like a typical for loop, right? So what's a for loop going to look like? So I have 4, right? And then I'm going to have, and let's actually make this just even to simplify it even more. Let's just write a for loop that counts from 1 to 10, right? Because that could be the list, right? So we're going to say what? What do I put in here? No, we're just going to write a for loop. So this is what I mean. Like, don't worry about that part of the problem. We're just going to write a for loop that goes through 10 numbers. That's going to count from 1 to 10. So we're going to hard code 1 to 10. Okay? So what am I going to put first? Why did I put the int before the I? Right. So this is where I'm declaring that variable. So I'm going to use it here. And then what's the next section of this going to be? Do what? Say that one more time. Yeah, the condition check, right? So I'm gonna. When do I want this to stop? Oh, and actually, let's not do because we're gonna do 1 to 10, right? So when do I want this to stop? When what is? So we're gonna do this as long as I is less than 11. Okay, and then what's the last component? I plus plus, and what does that do? Good, right? So yeah, it makes the value go up by 1, right? Okay, good. So this is my list, and let's just print out I, right? So I just want to see if this prints out. Now this is throwing an error because it's supposed to return a number, but I don't really care what it returns right now. So I'm just going to do return 0, and then over here I need to actually run that, right? So let's go cr dot count odds, right? Oh, gotta have that. So we'll go 1 to 10. Okay. I run this. There it is, right? 1 to 10. Right, Grace? First problem down. Yes. Well done. Okay. Y'all are not nearly as excited. Whenever I solve even simple problems, and I still think it's magical when I see numbers print out there. Okay, so now what do we want to do instead of just doing 1 to 10, right? So we need to make this automated somehow. What are we going to do? So what should 1 be in the range, right? What? Be my minimum, right? That's where I'm going to start, correct? So where am I going to replace that? Grace? So if I want, so here I've got it hard-coded, right? But I want it to start at the minimum number. So what am I going to do? Right? So here. Okay? And then now I want it to end at max. So what do I do? How do I do that? So as long as so it's going to run as long as I is less than or equal to max, right? Okay. So let's do it again. Let's see if it runs 1 through 10, but let's change the numbers, right? So now let's go 2 to 15, right? Run it, and we got it. Now listen, I want to make sure nobody underestimates what we're doing here, right? That idea of moving from hard coding, like picking a range and okay, I'm going to make it work for this range, and then I'm going to move it and try to make it more dynamic. That's the whole point, okay? So now I've added up all the I've printed out all the numbers, but what do I really want to do? Okay, so now this is where our decision tree kind of diverges, right? Because we could do this in 1 or 2 orders. We have 2 problems that we need to solve. I need to change my loop so that it just counts the odds, right? And I need to actually do the counting. But those are 2 different problems. Okay? So what can I do to solve one of those? Which problem do I want to tackle? Count the odds? Okay, cool. So let's figure out how we do that. Now, what do I need to do for I? When do I want to print it out? Well, so just use regular language. When do I want to print it out? When it's odd, right? Okay. There's a couple ways to go about doing it, right? So the easiest is inside here, where I have the value of I, what am I going to do? Well, so that's what I want to check. But how do I make it do something if a condition is true? An if statement. Well done, everybody. So if I say if, and now I can say I mod 2 equals what? 1, then do the thing that I want it to do, which in this case is printing out I for now, right? Okay? Is that good? All right, I want us to try, though. Yeah, Grace.
In my controller, when I did count odds, min, max.
Did you write min, max?
Min, max.
Okay, so remember in your code, you're passing in a value, right? So this is where you actually need to give it the values because you're calling the method instead of writing it, right? So you got to actually give it the values. Now, in your controller, if you want to, Grace, you could create 2 local variables called min and max. And then, use it there, right? Yeah.
So put in the numbers and it's doing the same thing, but now there's more errors.
Okay, let me check real quick. Oh, you're outside. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, 1 equal sign. Remember, you gotta have 2 equal signs, right? You gotta have it here. Do what? Well, let me do this for class, and we'll look at it in a bit. Okay. All right, here. Now we've got this. We've counted through each one, right? But I want to point something out to you. This isn't a big deal if I'm running between 2 and 15, right? So because that's going to be like 14 loops, okay? So it's not a very big deal for me to have this inside of here. But if let's say that I go from, I don't know, from 2 to 15,000, right? If I run it from 2 to 15,000, inside of here, I ran this if statement 15,000 times, right? That's a lot when it comes to efficiency. Let me ask you a question. What if I went up here and I said if I let's say, what number are we starting with?
1.
And I want to know, well, we're starting with a minimum, right? Because it might be 1, it might be 2. So if I'm starting with the minimum, if I just check and see if that number is minimum or is odd or even, right? Then I can change it. So if I say if min mod 2 equals 0. So if I'm only going to do this if the number is not odd, right? If the number's even, then I'm going to say min plus plus, right? So I'm going to make the minimum go up by 1. So if the number was even, it wouldn't have printed out that one anyway. So I'm going to go up by 1, and now I know it's odd, correct? So if I do that, now instead of having this here, I can have it at the top. What's my other problem, though, if I do it that way?
You have to create I outside of the.
So wait. Tell me what the problem is, not how to fix it.
I mean, since I belongs to for loop, you can't really use it.
Right, but I'm not using it outside of that. I just changed min, so now I'm setting I to an odd number, to the first odd number in the range. Right? This sets I to the first odd number in the range. Okay? Now, the only thing that's going to happen here is if I do it, it's going to start at an odd number, but then it's going to print out every number after that. So how can I make sure it only prints out every other number?
Oh, I plus equals 2.
So I equals I plus 2, right? And we can make that in shorthand by saying I plus equals 2. Okay? So now if I do it this way, that it runs that if statement once instead of 15,000 times. Okay? What's the problem with it running the if statement 15,000 times? For a program like this, nothing. But if you're like really writing a program, you want it to be efficient, then it would, that 15,000 processes is pretty big. Imagine how many times if Google did that on one of their servers. Yeah, it would be like they literally get billions of hits a day. Right? Okay. So now we've got this, right? So now we have our code that actually prints out each number. So we know that in here we have access to all the odd numbers, right? But we want to add them up. So how do we add them up? Now we're on to our next small problem to solve, right? So we want to get the sum of all those numbers, correct? How do we go about doing it? I could do a new method, right? Or I could add do it within the for loop, I think. That's a great question. Anybody have any ideas? So what? So I'm going to add up all the i's, right? Because I've already got it, so the i's are my odd numbers. So I just need to add those up. So now what am I going to do? What? That's the issue, right? Okay, so this is one of those things that you really should pay attention to, because this is something that happens all the time where you need to deal with data like this and you need to sort of collect information as you go inside a loop, right? So let's talk about what we would do if we did this. Let's say that I wanted to count up 5, 7, and 9. I wanted to add those together, right? What am I going to do? What's my sum before I start? 0, right? And then what do I do? Add each one in turn, right? So that sounds like a loop, doesn't it? So what's the first thing I add to 0? So 5, right? Which would be I, right? Would be my first number of I. So 5. So now the sum is what? 5. And then what do I do? Add 7. So 5 plus 7? 12, right? So 5 plus 7 is 12. My new sum is 12. And then what do I do? Join. 21. That's right. Right. Well done. Okay. So all I'm doing is I'm taking each number in turn, right? And listen, I know some of y'all feel like you need to use calculators to figure this out on your phone. I know you feel like that, but you really don't. You can just sit there and look at your computer or listen to the lecture and not be on your phone, because I'm sure it's your calculator that you're on your phone. So now that we have this, so what variable did I mention over and over again? Sum, right? Right? What's the initial value of sum? Okay. Now what do I do? So I don't want to print these out anymore. I don't care about printing it out.
Sum equals sum plus sum.
I, right? Okay, and the shorthand for this? Plus equals I, right? So sum plus equals I does the same thing, right? Now, what do I do at the end here? Because here I'm returning 0, but what do I want to return? The sum. Okay, does that make sense? Okay, now in the controller before, right, I'm not doing anything with it. It's just going to run. So if I run this, it's going to run. Well, actually, this is going to cause a problem probably because it's such a big number at that point, right? So let's drop that down. So I'm running it. Wait, what's happening? That's weird. What? So how do I print this number? How do I print the result? Because this is returning an integer, right? We know that it's returning an integer, but what are we doing with that integer? We're not doing anything. So now we need to do, all right? Whoop, 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 whoop. I know. Just checking to see if you did. Good catch, guys. Proud of you. Right? So now we got our answer. All right? You with me?
Well, yes, but yes.
You good? All right. Questions?
So instead of in the code runner method, instead of printing some there, you're just going to return some.
Right. Because here's the thing, guys. When you really start programming, you're not going to typically do things that require you to print things out in the console. That's for bug checking and things like that. Okay? And like as you develop it. But real programs don't typically print there. They're going to print elsewhere. So the information is usually passed around through returns. Okay? All right. Let's write another method. Right? Let's write a method that, let's see. Let's do a method that is, let's see, it returns an integer that is, let's see, a range, takes a range of numbers and then multiplies it by 2. Right? Really complex task that I see absolutely no valid real-world use for. But we're going to say count range multiply by 2. That's the name of that method.
You multiply
Count range multiply sum by 2. How about that? Okay, is that better? Huh? Is it better to you?
No, range times 2. I just don't know what you're asking. Like you could multiply each number by 2, multiply like different.
You're starting to bother me now. Now I'm starting to get angry.
Like, I don't know what you're asking.
We're gonna multiply the sum by 2. That's what it says. And Adam, that is a silly thing. I would never name a method that simply. No, I mean it would really be good too. But we're gonna leave it like this for now because it's fun. All right. So now here's the thing. What do we need in here? We need something similar, correct? Because we have a range. So we already figured out that problem. What do we need to figure out a range? Min and max. Okay. So this time, just because I don't want to confuse you on your variables, let's say int small and int large. Okay. Now we have our method. Count range multiply sum by 2. Okay. So here's the thing. It seems as if, count odd range multiply.
Of course. Oh wait, so it's only the odds.
Yeah, it's only an odd. Yeah.
What do you mean by range?
A group of numbers in order. Like 1 to 10 is a range. 50 to 60 is a range.
So then you multiply that by 2.
The sum of them.
Oh.
These are those moments where I'm like, maybe y'all weren't listening to me because that's like just what we did. We just wrote a method that counts the odd numbers, right? What?
You're doing the same thing, just multiply.
Yeah, right? I'm going to do the same thing and multiply it by 2. That seems, so we got to write all this out again, right? So we're going to go back and let's resolve all those problems. You ready? We could copy and paste it, but then what if I come back and go, you know what? Instead of the odds, let's add the evens.
change it.
We could, but now we got to change it in 2 places. Right?
Just call the other method.
So now I can. Wait, are y'all in pain or did you just get it? I don't. All right. So let's go count odds. Right. So I'm going to call that method first. Okay, and let's go. So we need a local one here. So let's have a int range sum equals, right? So I'm going to add up all the numbers in that range. But instead of rewriting the code, I've already written a small little program to do that for me, right? And it's called count odds, right? Now, what numbers am I going to pass in? So, Grace, you remember when you were talking about like you put min and max in there? So what numbers am I going to pass in now? But I don't. What? Yes, small and large, right? Because those are the values that this method received, right? So I'm going to pass these in. I'm going to say small, large, not larger. There you go. Okay. Did I? That doesn't make any sense. All right. Okay. So now I've done that, and then what do I need to do here? Multiply it by 2, right? So then I can just say return range sum times 2. But the other one, see, we already solved all these problems, right? So we've already done this, so we can get that, right? Okay. Now, we'll also point out what we really could do. So I'm adding these variables in here because y'all feel, I think you feel a little bit more comfortable with variables. But I could just take this out. And just return that method call. Right? Remember what happens. I want to make sure that you get this, right? So when I call count odd range multiply sum by 2 method, and I pass in the small and the large integers, then all I need to do is go back and I'm going to run this method with the numbers that were provided here. It's going to return that sum and then multiply it by 2. Okay? And then this method returns the result of that. So it gets kind of convoluted, but you don't have to go through all of that. It's easy, if you want to, you can just kind of break all of that down into different variables so that you can see the steps. And that's totally fine. Right? The overhead's tiny. So now instead of printing that out, I'm going to say count odd. So that was 63, right? So if we do this right, okay. So now if I do this, what should the result be? I ran it too fast. 126. Okay? So, to recap, I'm calling this method here. I'm saying I'm going to print something out. What I print out is a call to this method, cr.count odd range multiply sum by 2. And I pass in the range. That comes over to CodeRunner. It calls this method. I have 2 variables. It calls that number, or it calls the count odds method with the numbers that we passed in, and then multiplies it by 2, and then returns that to this line of code right here, and then prints it out. Oh yeah, no, it's totally pointless, right? We could have done it so much simpler. But the point, right? The point that I want to point out to you, or that I want you to kind of keep driving home, is that method interaction. We've got to see that methods interact with one another. Okay? So tomorrow we're going to do a lot of that with strings. Any questions? I'm about to stop the recording, so if there's any questions, ask me now so we can. Yeah, I'm going to post this. To which one? Okay.
Make like a method that just multiplies numbers, so we need to just multiply one range.
Right. I'm making a silly example to prove a point.
Yeah.
Right? Because sometimes the problem is real world problems get more complicated, so then we get convoluted. We get all of these convolutions in there that are not necessary to understand the content. Okay? Okay? Questions? Comments? Commiserations? Nope. There are a bunch of ways to solve it, right? Yeah. Okay. For me, I think that's good. What I'd like for y'all to do right now is to try to